everybody, and welcome to EntrepreNINES. I'm John Wist.
And I'm Bonni Mace. We are two Enneagram 9s who took the big leap into the world of entrepreneurship at a similar time. And this space is a space where we're inviting you to laugh and learn with us as we work to build businesses with soul. This is, I don't know what episode this is. 52?
No, we did 51.
We did 52. 52.
Yeah,
Sometimes
52.
we forget to look.
That's okay. It's
but
all right.
It's 52.
It's 52, and sometimes we bang the booms, and it's okay.
It was the table that time.
Oh, was it the table?
My depth perception failed me.
That's okay. I was looking at the board, so I just heard it.
Yeah. I was putting my phone down because I realized I started, for the video watchers will see this, I started with my phone like I was obviously very much reading it.
Right.
And then I was like, I don't need to read this. I'm going to put this away.
I got this.
And then I banged the table.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Also, like,
womp,
we
womp.
took a long break, so you're allowed to need to read the intro once again. You had gotten to the point where you weren't, and so.
It's true. Like, you guys don't know this as listeners because we're just going to release on schedule, but it has been a while. It's like we got in here and we're excited.
Yeah.
And then life lifed again, and we just,
Yeah. I mean, we are on schedule, but it's just we had to spread out the actual recordings. So.
All good things this time. No one's been sick again.
No.
Knock on the wooden table.
Oh my gosh, but so many people have like pneumonia, Bonni.
Around here, yes.
It's crazy.
It's making me feel less fragile.
I think that's legit. Because you paved the way. You were just being like,
don't make me sound like patient zero.
Pneumonia.
But I will say, like, when you get pneumonia as a 35-year-old in August, you're like, this is it. I'm dying.
Right.
Something is deeply wrong with me and my immune system.
Right.
Like, this must be near the end of my life.
Right.
And then you hear that 3 of your son's classmates have had pneumonia already.
Yeah.
And you feel a little better.
Yeah. Also,
not that the children have had pneumonia, just that it's not just you. Like, I'm not withering away.
Yeah. Also, though, like those children seem to just be like, I have a cough. I don't feel so good. And then they like,
oh, really?
Just tough it out.
In Caleb's class, they're gone for like 5, 6. One of them was gone for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah,
Then it must be just a variety of ranges of how it impacts kids.
Okay. It is. He said one of his classmates was gone for only 5 days. But then another one, he's like, I don't know, this guy's been gone for 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, ask your teacher.
Right. Yeah.
If you're actually worried, like you can ask her, and if she's allowed to tell you, she will. And if she's not allowed to tell you, she'll say, don't worry, it's okay.
Right.
But I can't tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's fine too.
Because they have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
But that involves talking to a grown up, and that's scary.
Hey.
So.
I get it.
I get scared.
Talking to grown-ups is a scary thing.
Thanks for listening to us, grown-ups.
Speaking of talking to grown-ups, we're going to talk to a grown-up on our next episode. And so it is time for a deep dive.
It is. Enneagram Type 3's.
Thanks for setting that up on a T.
That was good. That was a really good transition. Yeah. We planned it.
We did.
We didn't.
We didn't. No. Okay, so we're going to talk to Type 3. And so today is our Type 3 deep dive, which we haven't done yet because we have not talked to a Type 3 yet. So let's just start off, Bonni, with, there's always, each one of these has like a little name, moniker. Are you looking up the new one?
I'm looking up the new one because, again, this is always a thing. I need to just cross them off on here. And then I never remember until we're in the middle of recording a podcast.
I know. It's okay. I'll read the one that's on the page
for it.
Since the page is here. So Type 3
the page is here.
Used to be known as the successful achiever.
Guess what?
Is it the same?
3s are so good they didn't have to. Oh no, it's the admirable achiever.
Admirable, because I guess the definition of success is different for everyone.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, all right.
I don't know.
Admirable
achiever.
Okay.
Or a successful achiever, whichever one feels right for you. 3s.
Sure. So if you haven't listened to a deep dive before, the way we do this is we kind of go through some different kind of categories about that number. So core motivations, triads, wings.
That's right.
And pathways.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
You did.
Okay.
And then how to love them all.
Yeah.
That's more about us.
Yeah. Which is our addition to the whole thing. Okay. So we're going to start with core motivations for a Type 3.
Yes. And core motivations, remember, this is kind of the kicker of Enneagram. It's the thing that drives you. It drives your actions and your perceptions and your emotions a lot of ways. And so this is understanding the concept of your core motivations helps kind of set the foundation for everything else. And so for a type 3, their core motivation, their core fear, I'll start with, the thing they're trying to avoid, is being exposed as a fraud or a failure. They don't want to seem worthless or not successful, or so they avoid failure, whatever it takes.
Like the plague.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting that I've learned about 3s, though. So they want to avoid failure, but only on the things that they really feel are important.
Okay.
So there are some things that if a 3 doesn't care about, they don't have to be good at that.
Interesting.
And so sometimes 3s get tripped up. They're like, oh, yeah, no, I can fail at some stuff. And I'm like, but can you fail at the important stuff?
Right. So
and then they're like, oh, no, like I can be bad at a board game.
Okay. Yeah. Or like if I don't have like a passion for it, then it's okay if I'm not good at it kind of a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And like one of the subtypes is really like family focused.
Okay.
And so they like that subtype doesn't even, like the typical like stereotype is like they're workaholics and they want to be climbing the ladder all the time.
Right.
But then there's this one subtype that's more focused on family. And so then they get really tripped up. They're like, I don't care about climbing the ladder. And I'm like, but what if you were to fail as a father?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, kill me.
Oh, yeah.
Kill me now. So that is interesting about 3. That's just something that's
interesting.
Come to light recently.
Yeah.
So that's good to know as a 3. Their core desire is to have high status and respect. They want to be admired, respected, kind of like best in the room. If they value fashion, they want to be the best dressed. If they value climbing the ladder, they want to be the CEO, or if they want to be the best parent. These are the room moms that have the extra Halloween bags that are going to come home to us. Yeah. Tomorrow's Halloween when we're recording this. So these are the room moms that have the best bag. This is kind of the personality. Yeah. Because they want that. They want to
or have shown up with like the adult costume that is on point.
On point.
Yeah.
And the makeup to match.
All of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then their core weakness is deceit. And I will caveat, as we always do, core weakness always sounds like, oh my gosh, what in the world at first? Yeah. But it's always like their own brand, right? So deceit for a type 3 isn't just like they're not just like pathological liars. Yeah. They can embellish. Sure. Because the bigger the story, the better. Yeah. And so if they have an experience, they might embellish to make it sound like more impressive or more desirable. Yeah. Or more successful. So that is part of it. But really what this deceit means for them is that they lose themselves, because a type 3 walks into the room and they know exactly what every person would be most impressed by. Like we've talked about 2s walking to a room and knowing exactly what everybody needs. Yeah. A 3 kind of does that with like, this room will be most impressed with this mask. Interesting. And they put it on.
So it's like a self-deception.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so they forget that they're wearing a mask eventually.
Okay.
So, and this happens with 3s are part of the 3-6-9 triangle. We'll talk about this a little bit more with the gut stuff. Yeah. And so that means they can be most disconnected to how they feel. Just like as 9s, we're most disconnected to our gut and our sense of self without work. Right. 3s are that. So they end up deceiving, like, do I feel I fit here or whatever? Because they're just like, what are the measures of success? And I will be that. Yeah. They're known as chameleons.
So
sometimes.
I think this is I don't know if we've talked about this before, and I think we may have touched on it, but I feel like the more that we discuss core weaknesses in people, the more it's like, this is like almost like an inward facing weakness versus like what we would maybe brand, when you're talking about like a personality test or something, like a lot of it is kind of how someone projects themselves outwardly. Yeah. Whereas this, like, this continues to hammer home maybe the point for me that like the core weakness is more of a reflection of our inner weakness. Like the thing that gets us, that like hangs us up, and it's not the thing that necessarily is projected to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I feel like that's a really great soundbite for my coaching, by the way, because it is like, okay, so it starts on the inside and then that's what flows out.
Right.
So if you're so lost about who you are on the inside, because what you're more concerned about is, am I fitting the room? Am I fitting the room? Am I impressing the room? Then you get home and you're like, am I wearing a mask or not? I don't even know. I think identity crises.
Yep.
Are probably pretty common.
Okay.
Like getting home, like being quiet and alone and having to face like who I am for an average 3. This is what I'll say, like healthy 3s who are aware of this, they're not doing this anymore. Yeah. But for an average 3, you might look in the mirror and be like, who the heck is looking back at me from time to time?
Yeah.
So if you felt like that as an Enneagram 3 before, you're not broken.
Yeah.
Like this is just part of the growth journey.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And do you mind if I do a quick aside actually? Because Lauren brought up like, I can't remember. We were talking about we might have been talking about 9s in one of our recent episodes, and you said maybe average 9. And I was trying to say like she's talking like that you were talking about someone who's like neither like growing nor like self-destructive. You're just like kind of like riding the middle.
Yes.
And you're not really like maybe at, and it's not saying you're not self-aware, but like you're not maybe in a season of like seeking knowledge of yourself, but you're also not like
default mode of operation.
Yeah. So that's just a clarity on that too. But,
not traumatized, but not actively like working against your or working with or toward your growth.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that was just
maybe I'll say default mode of operation.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the sniffles that are happening. By the way,
gross. Oddly allergy-ish today. I felt it this morning. Yeah. And
this is a rabbit trail. We went apple picking yesterday.
Oh, yeah,
so it was like all the open dust and it's just
all the
in my
things.
eyes still.
Yeah, it's okay.
Lungs.
It's
anyway. Okay, last thing.
Go ahead.
The last core motivation for a type 3 is the core longing. And this is simply a statement that if you hear it and can truly believe it, you're going to experience like satisfaction and contentment.
Yeah.
So it's simply like kind of a phrase that's meant to say like, hey, this is what you want.
Yep.
Okay. So theirs is you are loved and valued for simply being you. And this kind of pushes against some of the achieving
or like performative nature.
Yes. Yeah. They feel like they need to do all the time.
Yeah.
And we'll just move right into the gut thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really quick, because this is really going to tie right into the core longing. So they're part of, for their triads, they're part of the heart triad, which is the feeling center. And so what they struggle with is shame, like deep shame. And that's very related to your identity. Yeah. The feeling of I'm just inherently not enough. Right. Yeah. And then what they want and what they're like aiming for is significant identity. So those things are like,
tugging against each other.
Yes. Yeah. All the time. They want to be important. They want to be loved by people for who they are, but they struggle with feeling not enough all the time. So this triad is 2s, 3s, and 4s. Yeah. And so you'll remember we've already talked about 2s and 4s now. Yeah. And so 2s, they go for significant identity and earning love by serving. Yeah. 4s, they go for significant identity and earning love by being the most unique person you've ever met. Yeah. And then 3s, they want to earn love and significant identity by winning. Like all the time. Yeah.
Success, achievement. Yeah. Whatever that means for them specifically.
Exactly.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like whenever we've talked about triads too, the number that's kind of like in the middle of the triad kind of most strongly kind of like reflects that character. Is that right? Or
they're most disconnected. So this is your decision-making triad. So they feel best making decisions that emotionally feel right. Yeah. Like 8, 9s, and 1s in the gut. Like we make those decisions, in our gut and we just know. Yeah. Like we don't have to have hard facts and we don't have to like feel sunshine and rainbows about it. Yep. And then 5, 6, and 7s, they're the head. So they are the pro-con list people most of the time. But what's interesting is 3, 6, and 9s, when it comes to that decision-making center, like we feel least connected to it. So 3s will often like push their emotions down, even though they're very emotionally driven. Yeah. And so if you talk to a 3, especially if they're stressed out in that moment, and you're like, hey, it seems like you're feeling mad.
Yeah.
And especially if mad is a sign of failure to that 3, they're going to say, I'm not mad. I'm fine.
Right.
I feel great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they stuff it down.
Stuff it. Which is interesting too, because I think like when you think about like a person who's an achiever, I would say you don't often most associate those people with making decisions out of emotion.
Right.
Which is also...
Because we tend to demonize that a lot.
Right. Which is also a very interesting kind of like tension that maybe is more culturally driven.
That's probably true. That's probably true about America.
Yeah. Like I think that's a more culturally driven thing, that like a emotionally driven person can't make choices that would lead to achievement. But then again, I don't know.
Your emotions give you very important information.
Yeah.
If you learn to listen to them.
Like just current cultural context tells us like the emotion of fear drives a whole lot of decision making at the moment. So like, I mean, just because it's emotion doesn't mean it has to be like dramatic or like high energy or anything. It could be other things. So yeah.
And the truth is we probably are all more making emotional decisions than we realize. Like probably all of us.
Yeah.
Actually wrote about that recently in my blog series.
Nice.
So go and read. Talked about fear. Talked about outrage. Tomorrow I'm talking about anger.
Nice.
So anyway, but and so many people I think do make decisions out of those things and don't realize it. Like they think they're being logical because obviously we should be afraid of this. And so they try to like logic their fear into validity instead of just saying, honestly, I am afraid of this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to acknowledge that feeling and then assess like how logical is this, or then assess what I need to do to move myself through this, or fear or anger or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's like good. Feelings. And again, with like, this might be a fun decision-making, might be a fun podcast episode in the future.
Yeah.
But remembering we have access to all of the decision-making triad parts. So we have access to our head, our heart, and our gut.
Yeah.
But we repress one. And so what's interesting is that 3s, 6s, and 9s, the ones we actually feel most comfortable accessing quickly, we suppress at the same time.
Okay.
But so that means as a 9, we like actually do use a lot of logic and we do use a lot of emotions.
Right.
But when we need to feel good about our decision, we actively suppress. So same thing with the 3. They feel great with logic. They feel great with a gut feeling, or they can get to those things, but they suppress their feelings. And what they need is to actually feel emotionally good about
what they're making that decision about. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool.
It's very fascinating.
That is we'll have to. That is a good future episode.
Hopefully we make a note. Maybe we should have notepads to scribble on in the future.
It's a great idea. I'm going to text you right now while you talk about wings.
While I talk about wings, Shauna's going to text me so we don't forget. Because, see? The cell phones are just magnetically attracted to the tables today.
This is why you don't take your cell phone out when you record things. Just don't do it, people.
Life advice. Okay, so wings are your neighbor numbers, right? They exist on either side of your number on the Enneagram. For 3s, it's really easy. They have type 2 as a wing, and they have type 4 as a wing. And so the 3 wing 2, the 2s, like we've talked about before, the loving people. Yeah. And so these people are very charming and they're very adaptable and they're ready to meet you where they are. And they really can be like huge performers.
Yeah.
The nickname right here actually says the star.
The star.
Because they want you to love them and they're going to meet you where they are to make sure that you love them.
Interesting.
And so they're going to use a lot of flattery and things like that too.
Okay.
When they're struggling though, they can be like super comparative and competitive because they're already insecure about how they are.
Okay.
Yeah. And John's smirking. And so that the whole comparison thing becomes a huge issue for them. It just inflates to like a whole new level.
Okay.
And then really what's like super admirable about them is that they have, they know what everybody needs to be impressed by.
Yeah.
And then they have this 2 superpower to also know like maybe what they need. So they can use the flattery, the charm, and their gifts to be like, I've got you the best thing that you've ever wanted. And boom, they can meet you just where they are. So they really can be intuitive and make you feel like incredibly special. They can call out your gifts.
Yeah.
And so it can be like a wonderful thing to know too. A 3 wing 2, I should say. A 3 wing 4. So the 4 is the like very creative,
Yeah.
introspective.
Yep.
Right. So these 3s can be quieter on the surface. They're not as quite like outgoing and bubbly.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say though. They're a type 3, so they're still quite outgoing, but they're just not as outgoing as a 3-wing 2.
Yeah.
Probably a 3-wing 2 is the person that they walk into the room and like if they're at going to a party, one, they're going to be fashionably late.
Okay.
Because when they're fashionably late, they're going to make an entrance and everybody's going to turn around and be like, they're here. Like, this is great, and they love it.
That's awesome.
They love it. Okay. So 3-wing 4, like they'll just show up.
Yeah.
And then eventually the whole room is attracted to them. And like 3s are very magnetic.
Yeah.
But they don't probably come with like as much fanfare.
Got it.
As a 3-wing 2. So
that's funny.
They're a little more private. They're okay being more quiet and intellectual. And they also, because they have that draw towards uniqueness more, they're more prone to embellish just for the wow factor.
Interesting. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So 2's kind of locked in some competitive vibe and they feel like they need to like one up people.
Right.
And then a 3-wing 4 is just going to have like fantastical stories all the time.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So when they're struggling though, they have a deep sense of failure because if you remember from our 4 conversation too, like their struggle with shame is so deep because it's not even about what they're doing. It's just simply about who they are. And so while shame is about who you are, like a 3 tends to try to associate that with their actions, but then a 3-wing 4 is going to associate that a little more personally with their identity too. So they're going to struggle a little bit more with that and be more afraid of failing. And then the other thing that they're wonderful, it's called the inspiring quality on here, is that they're like super craftsmen. Right.
Okay.
So because they're very creative, they're also going to be introspective. They're going to just bring like a depth to their work that's more about like creating that unique and like very admirable thing in the world. And so they can be quite innovative too. Okay. And that's
interesting.
Wings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And then the next thing would be paths.
Yeah.
Right.
Paths, there are 4 of them, but we only talk about 2 here.
Okay.
And so the paths are kind of where you go either in stress or in growth. So you're connected to 5 numbers overall in the Enneagram. So now we've already talked about 3. So we're going to talk about the other 2. And I've alluded to this because they're in our triangle.
Yeah. We are connected.
We have a special triangle.
Yeah.
And so in stress, a 3 is going to move toward a 9.
Okay.
The unhealthy qualities of a 9.
Yeah.
And we are very familiar with the unhealthy qualities of a 9 because we happen to be that type. So they're going to get real quiet.
Yeah.
They're going to get very withdrawn. They're going to become a busybody because they don't have anything. When they're stressed, they're feeling like they're failing. So they don't actually want to apply themselves to anything that matters because they're afraid of that failure.
Yeah.
So they're going to just like do busy work, which is like, we can.
Yeah.
We're great
kings and queens of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I have something important to do. Let me get a toothpick on my kitchen counter real quick. No problem.
Yeah.
So a 3 can really channel that kind of thing.
Mine's like, how many times can I do the dishes today?
Which is a lot when you have a family of 5.
Yes, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's like 4.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My dad's in town visiting and he's like, so y'all run your dishwasher every day, huh? And I'm like, sometimes twice a day. You wouldn't believe it. I was like, especially when the Wist come over for dinner. And it's definitely a twice a day kind of dishwasher day.
Ours has become twice, like as the norm.
As the norm. Yeah.
Like, yeah. And it's sometimes 3. So
yeah. Dishes. Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
We did the thing.
Yeah.
We got busy. Anyway, so yeah, like I said, 3s are usually very outgoing and everything. And when they're in stress, they actually withdraw. So they borrow some of our withdrawn. They want to be left alone and not bothered. They want to like retreat, and they also can get into a depression, but then they're not going to let anybody know that they're depressed. So that's another one of our good qualities, right? Okay. Like we don't want to tell you how I'm feeling because that's going to be a bother, right?
Yeah.
So they'll get depressed, but then they'll be like, I'm fine.
Right.
Like, no big deal. And they'll borrow some narcotizing.
I was going to say, like, that kind of, I feel like, dips into the view of not like failing, right? Like, like how can I feel super crappy, but not let anybody know, because then they might know I'm like struggling and failing at something. Yeah.
While also avoiding the thing I'm afraid I'm going to fail.
Right.
Yeah. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Okay. That's fun.
Yeah.
terrifying. Okay.
It's terrifying.
Sorry.
I know. It's funny to hear it like put in somebody else's, kind of something that can be normal for us.
Yeah.
This is a good one. They can get very stubborn when they're stressed too. They don't want anybody's help because then you're definitely failing if you need somebody else's help.
Right.
Because comparison and competition are kind of at the forefront of their mind. So asking for help is immediate failure.
Yeah.
And stress. It's not true type 3s.
Right.
Asking for help is not a sign of failure.
Right.
Okay. I just needed to say that.
But it is what you feel.
It's what they believe.
It's what you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I get.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's enough of that. Let's talk about what they look like when they're growing.
Yep.
So when they're growing, they borrow the healthier qualities from a type 6.
Okay.
And so this is really interesting because we like obviously flip flop for us, and we are healthy in a 3 and we are in stress in a 6. So borrowing the healthy qualities of a 6 seems impossible for a type. But they will more rest in like type 6s aren't super concerned about like what they do in the world. They're more concerned about like who they're with and if they're creating a safe community, right? Like
Safety. Yeah.
Yeah. So type 3, when they're growing, can start to let go of some of the competitive nature.
Okay.
And they can embrace the community support building up other people and being built up by other people.
Almost like a communal success versus an individual.
Right.
Okay.
They don't have to beat everybody.
Right.
Everybody can win. Basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it doesn't make them less than.
Yeah.
Which is their default mode of operation.
Okay.
And then they become very loyal because some of the problem with deceit is if you're in one room and you know what that person wants, you can say what they want to hear. Yeah. And then when you go into another room and they hate the person in the first room, then you know what they want to hear. And then you can be really, betray them, right?
Sure,
the first person.
Divisive
Is a good word. Yeah. And so being more aware of that.
Okay.
And being true to who you are and what you feel about other people.
Okay.
It can just feel easy to sort of let that go and please the person in front of you.
Yeah.
3s don't want to admit this, but like people pleasing is a huge thing for them.
Sure.
And they think it's because they want to win, but there's also this deep need for love and significant identity.
Yeah.
So that's where some of that gets dicey. So they let go of that.
Okay.
And are more honest. They're willing to ask for help and advice.
Yeah.
A default mode of operation 3 knows everything there is to know already. You can't give them a piece of advice or wisdom that they don't already know.
Sure.
Like you just can't.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But as they grow and become more comfortable with their weakness and become more comfortable with their humanness and understanding that like as they are, their enoughness, as I like to say a lot.
Yeah.
Then advice isn't a threat anymore.
Interesting.
Because advice, if
you
you see advice as a competition, then the person who has the better advice is always winning.
That is so interesting to put it to phrase it that way, because I feel like, I don't know. I think that there is a level of, maybe it's default mode of operation for a 9, right? This probably doesn't feel like a growing type of moment where like advice is really important. Mm-hmm. Like advice, like you have to consider every's thoughts about the situation.
Yeah, we're absorbing all of it all the time.
Like or whatever you're doing. Like I'm thinking about like specifically just especially in business, right? And in growing a business, like I don't ever want to think I'm the expert at this, even though I'm doing it by myself.
To your detriment almost.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many people can I get around me to tell me all the things that are possible?
Yeah.
And then I can start to, I guess, kind of try to figure it out, But like to have that be seen as competition, it's like so kind of interestingly foreign to me.
Mm-hmm. Same.
But it makes like thinking about relationships with either people that I know are 3s or people that I would like have a leaning towards. I'm not going to say assume because I don't want to like type them, but like have a leaning towards that's their mode of operation. Like that I see that. Mm-hmm. Like I can relate to that because I can see like times even when I've offered a thought.
Yeah, and it's like,
whoa.
Like,
yeah. oh, okay.
I thought we were given mutual advice here.
Right. Yeah. Right. Like I thought this was a more of a give and take, and it's more of a, no, here's what I think.
Actually, in this relationship, I was the mentor and you were the mentee.
Right.
So how dare.
Right. Which is,
Interesting.
which I think, again, like, and we can talk a little bit more about maybe dynamics, especially next week in our interview, but like that for a 9 can be very deflating.
It is.
Because then it's like, oh, I just offered something which I don't do that unless I'm ready. And unless I've just
takes a lot of oomph.
Gotten all of that energy just ready to like, channel that to you. And now you're basically saying no.
Yeah.
I don't want it.
Which is like my deepest fear, that my voice doesn't matter. And you're basically saying to my face, actually your voice doesn't matter and I'm offended by it. Like double whammy. Terrible.
Or like, oh, really great. I already knew that. I'm ahead of you.
Yeah. It's the worst. And you're like, I'm going to go back to my cave.
Okay. I'll go crawl in my hole again. Okay. Sorry. That was just
no, it totally is.
Trail. But
there was one time I can give this example. I actually used these papers for someone we were working with.
Yeah.
Because I got feedback after a meeting one time. And the feedback was, sometimes you need to sit back and listen instead of feel like you have to say your piece all the time.
Okay.
Which you've been in meetings with me.
Yes. Yes.
That's not usually what I do.
No.
And in this particular season, I was saying more. One, because I was leading the meetings. Right. And 2, because it was like a very tense season. And like I had some information about, I mean, it was COVID times. And so everything was digital, and that was, my area to run. Yeah. And so I was offering more. And then this was the feedback that I got from this type 3. And I finally sat down with him and I said, I need you to look at these. I brought this cheat sheet with the paths for 3. And then I brought the 9 cheat sheet with the growth paths for the 3. And I said, I need you to see that your area of growth is shutting up and listening. And that my area of growth is speaking up and standing my ground. Yeah. And that we are opposite in that. Right. And that's okay. But like what looks like growth for you is me settling and being average or being in stress. Yep. And what looks like growth for me is you settling or ego or being in stress, right? Ego, I think is the word I use in that situation. And so that's like a huge thing. If you're a type 9 that works with a type 3 or a type 3 that works with type 9s. Yeah. I think that can be a huge area of tension, and you could like really bump heads with each other if you think that about each other. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. So, and that like changed things for a long time after I finally had that conversation, because I was actually in the midst of this training. Yeah. Yeah. When that happened to you. And it was just sort of like this light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh. And that's the reason I love Enneagram. When like growth does look different for each one of us. Right. And so assuming like, oh, you're being unhealthy because you're talking a lot. Right. Right. That's not necessarily true. Right. Right. Which I think is a good segue, because a lot of our audience are 9s. Like, how do we love a 3 well? Because I think we've just had like a unintended conversation about how like there's potential for tension. Yeah. In these specific relationships between 9s and 3s. Like it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but there's potential for it. And so I think it opens the door to, okay, well then how do we love a 3 well? Yeah. I mean, listening to them. Yeah. For sure. They want to be heard and they want to be admired. Yeah. And so I do think that giving them genuine encouragement is important. Yeah. But not flattering them is important. Yeah. Not feeding the flattery, but encouraging based off what you actually see as growth. Yeah. 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 So it's like a really fine line to not just, like when they're telling a huge embellished story, like we all have the radar to know when something is overinflated, right? Yeah. Sure. And like the tension is, oh, this person really needs this. Like, let me cheer. Like, yeah, you scaled Mount Everest. I thought so many people died doing that and you did it. Right. Like, okay, don't do that. Just, I hear you out. Yeah. Yeah. And instead say, I feel like you're really proud of your hiking accomplishment. Yeah. Like, it feels like that's really important to you. Is that right? Yeah. And I would say anyway, like, we have this empathy radar as type 9s.
Yeah.
And so I think we especially can see beyond that and say there's some feeling that's really important here.
Yeah.
And so being able to say, to like name that for them, because
Sure.
naming feelings can be so difficult for 3 because of where they are in that triad.
Yeah.
Being able to name that emotion and for them to then feel genuinely validated of like, oh, you saw beyond my mask and you still love me.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to have enough discernment, like in the moment, to see like what's actually underneath, like the core, like the core motivations, like what's actually inspiring this story or like whatever they really want me to hear. And being able to name that, I think, is really good.
And introducing, I think, our love of gray area a little bit.
Sure.
Or, like when we're growing our love of gray area, because I think a type 3 can be very black and white in their default mode of operation, because somebody has to be a winner and somebody has to be a loser.
Sure.
And what's intuitive for a 9 is there can be wholeness and there can be mutual flourishing, right? Like we really have a value of mutual flourishing, and their default mode of operation is competition. Someone has to win, someone has to lose.
Yeah.
And so in those moments of like your advice being shut down, like this would have been useful for you to have in the past, I guess.
Sure.
But in those moments, when you're being shut down, like as an aware, like trying to grow 9, instead of being like, oh, my voice doesn't matter. Right. But to be able to securely say, that doesn't match my experience, but I'm glad that works for you.
Right. Yeah.
Like, so you can disagree without then saying you're also a loser.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I also think there's opportunity there to like, and this is a not that long ago experience, and it wasn't face to face, and so that makes it more difficult, right?
Yeah,
like it was through writing, and so it makes it really difficult. But like also feeling the need as a 9, I think probably like as like a person who wants there to be peace and not tension, even when I feel the tension, right? Like so, like I put things into the world. The response was basically like you're, I guess the response was more like, here's my experience and here's why it actually makes more sense than what you told.
Yeah, here's why your idea is stupid.
Well, yeah, or
like
just
in
like
nicer words.
Yeah, well, just more like that like kind of like almost like a that's great, like
oh, that's even worse.
Like a oh, let me just give you a little pat on the head, but here's actually what you really experienced.
Yeah.
It's almost like and maybe I would say like there's a more even a more personal maybe kind of like thing that comes from this, because I feel like there's been a lot in my life of people telling me how I feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And assigning feeling to me. And that was a little bit of what happened. It was also more kind of specific and technical than that. It wasn't just feelings, right? It was more like, no, here's how your experience, like what that means. And so I took a couple days.
Nice. Yeah.
I didn't respond right away. I took a couple days, but then I figured, like they're offering to like, even though it's kind of competing with what I really learned, and they're kind of trying to tell me what I needed to learn instead of what I actually did learn.
Yeah.
Like how can I respond in a way that says, I still value what you're telling me.
Yes.
Like I'm not just going to like blow it off and sweep it under the rug because you kind of missed an opportunity to maybe encourage my learning.
Right.
Instead, you just took all of your learning and been like, oh no, this is it. And so how can I say like, oh, well, that's really interesting. And thank you for offering your learning so that maybe I can like see a different side of it or like understand how these very like similar, because I think the idea was like they found some sort of connection to the specific things I was addressing. Right. But they had different experiences with how that played out. Yeah. Okay. I can receive that. And I can understand like there are different ways that this could have played out. Right. It didn't for me. Right. And that's what I wanted to offer. But like I can accept yours. Right. And say, now I have that for another time, like in my back pocket, that this is a different way. This is a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
Instead of like coming back at it with
let's fight,
like energy.
Yeah.
That is more confrontational.
Yeah.
Which just isn't in our nature, I don't think.
No.
But
I'm going to give up an opinion really quick if
Yeah.
I have to fight about it.
Yeah.
In
yeah.
my like default
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah. I'm just going to drop it and be like, fine.
You're the best, brilliant person.
Go for it.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, there's opportunity to encourage, even if it maybe at first feels like offensive or an attempt at like,
right.
at diminishing, because I think that's what it did.
Yeah.
It felt like an attempt, and I don't think it was intentional either. So that's the other thing, is like recognizing it's not intentional, but there was an attempt to diminish, and I can take it and kind of
right,
not keep in that same energy and headspace.
Yeah. And like all of what you're saying, I feel like is exactly like what some of the work of reflection does. So you stepping away and taking a minute.
Yeah.
24 hours times 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. And to do the reflection, to understand like what did it ping inside of you? Like what does the response need to be from a healthy way? Like is important. And especially with written communication and like things on the internet, we can tend to like feel like it's on the internet right now, so I have to respond to it right now.
Yep.
And then like these emotions are pinged up. So like in this case, like if the person is a type 3, I assume like they probably read that, they probably felt something about that stirred up their own fear. And because emotion itself is foggy for a type 3, they couldn't like name it as an emotion. So they named it as competition.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And like the way to get rid of this icky feeling, whatever it is that got pinged in me, instead of looking at it and saying, what is this icky feeling?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm going to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is. And I think that's just again, a good example of like the competing motivations of a 9 and a 3, of like, we want harmony, we want togetherness, we want mutual flourishing.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, probably everybody wants mutual flourishing, but doesn't understand like how I can get, maybe I'm overgeneralizing. I'm going to walk that back. But but then like the default mode operation of a 3 is that there can be no mutual flourishing, or I suck.
Right.
Like,
well, and I think maybe it's, maybe people wouldn't state it as like, I want mutual flourishing, but I don't think that for the most part, I don't think people are intentionally destructive.
No.
Like when it comes to,
they're trying to be self-protective.
Yeah. I feel like it's more of a putting up a wall for myself versus like a tearing down of you. And so and that's maybe what I read into this too, is like, I don't think there was an attempt to tear down. It was an attempt to like, somehow can make a connection, but also say like, been there, done that, up a level.
Here's what's next for you. Look out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Versus like just wow, I've had similar experiences. Here's how that's played out for me. Maybe.
Yeah.
It was more like a point by point, almost rebuttal.
Yeah.
but this is it. Not this,
and
interesting. It was, so, but anyways, so it's just, it's interesting.
What's funny in my life, because we have like the connection of the 3.
Yeah.
And like one of the paths we don't talk about is a blind spot path, which is like the people you're most comfortable with, and you borrow the unhealthy qualities of your growth number. So for us, it's borrowing the unhealthy qualities of a 3.
Okay.
And then we're very hoity-toity with the people we love the most, right? Like then we know all the stuff for those people.
Yeah.
And so I call it my big sister energy.
Okay.
Like my big sister energy comes out a lot in people I'm super comfortable with. And then I do this. And so this has had to be something that I've had to learn.
Interesting.
Of like, like when I'm feeling really good, like then I can come in and give all this unsolicited advice essentially. And like people don't like that. Like nobody likes that because it is diminutive, but how do you say that word? Advice, please.
Demeaning?
Yes.
Demeaning.
Yeah.
That
feels right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's another word that's adjacent to it.
Diminutive.
Yeah.
Something like that.
See, I can see it spelled, but I don't know how to say that word.
Yeah, it's hard to say it. But
it means we read.
But I get that too, even in like parenting, right? Like I can see that in myself in parenting where like I have the hardest time saying things out loud to the general public that I feel like mean a lot. but I can run my mouth for so long when it comes to parenting.
Yeah. Big dad energy.
Yeah. Super big dad energy. And that's something I've had to check myself on and start allowing my kids to call out in me.
Yeah.
And say to them, like, you can tell me when I've gone too far.
Yeah.
Because I
can accept that.
I can accept that. And I want you to hear me, but that doesn't mean I have to talk at you all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So to bring this back around, because
sorry.
I feel like what can be harder as a type 3. So I'm going to end this on a hype.
Yeah.
Because I don't want type 3s to walk away from this being like, oh, they think nothing of me, because I don't. I love type 3s.
Yeah.
Type 3s are some of the most powerhouse numbers on the Enneagram. They can get stuff done by themselves. They can get stuff done with people.
Yep.
And when they're focused on growth and health, they bring everybody with them efficiently. Like they waste no time. They waste no resource.
Yep.
They waste nobody's effort, emotion, or energy because that drives them crazy. Yeah. Rightly. And I'm sure as 9s, we feel that too. Like we definitely, it's funny. We're either all lollygag or like, get out of my way, you know?
Why are you stopping me?
Traffic on the way here was a great example. Oh, John kicked the table.
I'm so sorry.
Was a great example of that for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so knowing, like, yes, this is how we can love a type 3 well, but also to say to type 3s listening to this, like the world would not go round the way it does without type 3 leaders.
Yeah.
And, there are ways you can be destructive in your leadership, but there are ways that we can all be destructive in our leadership.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would say the healthy 3s that I've met in my life are like some of the people I respect the most and have learned the most from.
Yep.
And who have created some like incredible organizations and resources. And like when a type 3 is growing, they are the ones that can actually come alongside and make mutual flourishing happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can like they can build amazing communities and they can hype everybody up because they're optimistic, right? Like because they don't want to fail, they're going to turn every failure into an opportunity. Once they can face failure. Yeah. And so type 3s just become like incredible people to work with. Yeah. So we'll end on a high note to hype up the type 3s without flattery. I mean that genuinely.
Like it's for real.
Yeah. For real.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I think it's going to be fun to talk to our type 3 in our next episode. Yeah. She's a local business owner. We've both hired her. Yeah. We haven't, I was going to say worked with her, but we've hired her.
We have hired her.
And so we enjoy her and enjoy what she does in the community. And so it's going to be fun to have her in here.
In the studio with
us, which is going to be kind of fun.
A first.
And and just have more of a conversation about what it's like to be a type 3 business owner. So I'm excited about it. That will be in our next episode. We'll follow that up just like we have been with some of our reflections and things like that. But yeah, we hope this is helpful. This was a long episode.
Yeah. Sorry. We got going.
We really dug in. But it's been our first deep dive in a while. And so it was fun. Yeah. If you, check the show notes for like references to other things that we're doing right now. And definitely leave us a rating and review, because we'd love to see more people listening. So.
And speaking of connection, we weren't really speaking of connection, kind of. Yeah. We have a Facebook group now.
Oh, yeah.
And so that information is going to be in the show notes. So if you'd like to connect to our Facebook group, I've recently set up some automated prompts that help you set your goal for the week. And then celebrate what you actually did for the week, which is kind of a riff off of like what we were doing in Work Like a 9.
Sure.
And so it's just a place of more like Enneagram 9 business owners is what it's called, but that link will be in the show notes. And we'd love to have you come along because we'll drop information and episodes and ways for connection there. And there'll also be places to like promote what you're working on.
Nice.
We'll have some specific posts for that too. So,
very cool.
Yay. Awesome. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Cool. We'll see you next time.
Bye.